So recently, I've taken a lot of the tanks behind me and changed them from shrimp-only tanks to community tanks, keeping fish and shrimp together. I get a lot of people message me to say, Rich, what can I keep with my shrimp? Can I keep fish with my shrimp? Which fish can I keep that won't eat my shrimp? And in this video, I'm going to share with you my experiences to how I go about setting up a tank so you can successfully keep shrimp with your fish. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Richard and I'm a fish and shrimp keeper based in the UK. So behind me, I have 9 tanks set up of various different sizes, and over the last few years, they've mainly been set up to house shrimp. But as you may have seen recently, I started to get a little bit bored of a shrimp-only tank, so I've spent some time building community tanks with various different fish. Now for this setup to work and to prevent all of our shrimp being eaten, it's really important we put some things in place, not only choosing the fish wisely, and we'll come on to that in a bit, but also how you go about setting up your tank to give yourself and your shrimp the best chance of success. So let's start at the start. Let's assume at this point you're starting with a brand new tank. If your tank is already set up, we'll come on to that in a bit. But at this point, let's imagine you're starting a brand new tank and you know you want to keep fish and shrimp. The first thing I would recommend is to set up your new aquarium and to let it run for about 4, 6, 8 weeks. And I know that is incredibly tough. To fill a tank with water, put some decorations and rocks in it and plants and whatever, and then not put any life in it for 1 to 2 months is incredibly tough. It's hard to resist the urge to go to the store and buy some shrimp, some fish, whatever. Taking your time now will pay dividends in the long run. Let me explain why. When we set up a brand new aquarium, it's essentially a sterile box containing water, substrate, plants, rocks, whatever. We need to give that tank time to season. Now, not to cycle. Cycling an aquarium, cycling a filter is something completely different. At this point, I'm talking about allowing life to develop in your aquarium. To give our shrimp the best chance of success, we need to provide them 2 things they love. The first is biofilm. And biofilm is essentially if you've ever taken a rock or a heater out of an aquarium, and yes, it's wet, but it's slightly slippery. It's almost slimy. That's biofilm. Biofilm is a microscopic film of starts of algae, of bacteria, of microscopic crustaceans. It's essentially a layer of life. And this layer of life is the favorite food of a shrimp. If you've ever looked into an aquarium and you've seen shrimp on rocks or on the heater or on the filter pipe or on the plant leaves, and they're constantly, that is the shrimp eating the biofilm. They're dining on the microscopic crustaceans that cover every single surface in the aquarium. Biofilm takes time to develop. It takes at least 4, 6, 8 weeks for it to start to develop in your aquarium. Leaving your new aquarium to mature for a couple of months before you start adding fish and shrimp is the closest thing I can give you to a guarantee of success. Okay, so next, to give our shrimp the best chance of not only surviving but thriving in this new aquarium, is to make sure we set the tank up, providing them with plenty of hiding places. Shrimp are well aware they're at the bottom of the food chain. Fish are well aware that cherry shrimp are probably incredibly tasty. Given a chance, any fish with a mouth big enough will pick off a shrimp. What we can do to give our shrimp the best chance of success is to provide as many hiding places as possible. Now, those hiding places may come in the form of a couple of 3 pieces of bogwood. It may be some piles of rocks. My absolute favourite is live plants. Live plants not only provide masses and masses of hiding places for the shrimp, they provide feeding grounds, the biofilm developing on the leaves of the plant. The plants themselves actually help filter the aquarium water. They suck out ammonia and nitrites and nitrates as the plants grow. Any aquarium with live plants is a healthier, probably happier place than one without. But here it's all about providing hiding places. One of the best plants you can add, in my opinion, is Java moss. Java moss grows to form this thick clump that the shrimp, and particularly the shrimp babies, can tuck themselves inside. Not only will particles of food and fish poop gather there that they will dine on for days, but also, when it comes to being eaten, out of sight is out of mind. And if the fish swimming around can't see the baby shrimp in the Java moss, they leave them alone. They don't know they're there. The shrimp can feed and grow and molt and then go on to help build a large, healthy colony. The more hiding places you provide, the better the chances that the shrimp colony will grow and thrive and become a big, healthy colony that can sustain 1 or 2 shrimp being picked off by the fish, but the colony as a whole will grow. in pretty much every single one of my tanks. I add live plants, some rocks, and if I've got it, pieces of bogwood. And anyone who's watched me for a while will know I essentially put Java moss in pretty much every single one of my shrimp tanks. It's like a miracle plant in my experience. Now, before we move on to the next part of our setup, you may not be aware, I recently wrote a book, the Neocaridina Shrimp Handbook, and I've placed a link in the description below and a QR code on screen, which will take you to a free sample. You can download the first 13 pages of the book, absolutely free. See what you think. If you like it, you may decide you want to purchase the whole book. If you don't, enjoy the first 13 pages and keep them on me. Okay, so our new aquarium is up and running. We're going to let it run for a couple of months. We've got lots of hiding places. We've got lots of live plants. We've got plenty of spaces the shrimp can go to reduce the chance of them being eaten by fish. What do we do next? The next step is to add the shrimp before the fish. Ideally, you want to put the shrimp in and leave them for as long as you can, 2, 3, 4 months if you can. Let them get to know the tank. Let them find all the hiding spaces. Let them settle in and breed and increase in size. If you put 10 or 15 shrimp in on day one and you give those shrimp 3 or 4 months, hopefully that colony will reach 50, 60, 100 individuals before you add the shrimp. That way, if 1 or 2 shrimp are picked off, you've still got a big healthy colony that can continue to grow and produce babies. If you've just got 10 shrimp and 6 get picked off by the fish, the chances of those 4 going on to build a big healthy colony is seriously reduced. Get the shrimp in first. Let the colony grow. Let the colony establish itself. You're essentially building initially a shrimp tank that you will then add fish to. That's what I did up here with the yellow cherry shrimp. I let that run for many months before adding the guppies. The same is true down here where I've got the black rose shrimp and I've recently added the celestial pearl danios. That tank is thriving. I've got so many black rose babies in there. At some point I'm going to have to start hoiking them out and giving them away or even selling them on eBay or whatever. Add the shrimp to the tank first. Let them settle. Let them begin to build as a colony. Let them learn where all the hiding places are. And you give yourself a much better chance in the long term of being able to keep a healthy colony of shrimp with a lovely population of fish. So at this point, we've got our tank. It's run for a couple of months. We've got lots of hiding places and live plants. We've added the shrimp. We've left them for a couple of 3 months. Let's assume at this point your shrimp tank is now thriving and it's time to add those fish. Probably the single most important decision is what fish are you going to add. Let's start by looking at some great tank mates for shrimp. And essentially you want to choose fish which are not too aggressive, don't get too large, and hopefully have a small mouth. Now some of the fish I've chosen here are the guppies. I've chosen up here, I've got ember tetras. Ember tetras are fabulous little packages of bright red with tiny mouths. They take almost no interest in the shrimp. Similarly, down here, I've got the celestial pearl danios, another fantastic tank mate for shrimps. In the past, I've kept cardinal tetras and neon tetras. I've kept harlequin rasboras. I've even kept fish as large as Congo tetras with shrimp. By setting the environment up in the correct way, you can get away with some surprisingly large fish with your shrimp. Now, with that said, I wouldn't go too large. You couldn't keep Oscars with cherry shrimp. You couldn't keep African cichlids with cherry shrimp. There are many Central and South American cichlids. You would not want to keep your shrimp. They're simply too aggressive. With the Congo tetras, yes, they got sort of 4 or 5 inches, but they typically stayed up near the surface. They weren't massively interested in the shrimp. Even a fairly small South American cichlid does tend to be fairly aggressive. They will go out of their way to root the shrimp out and essentially see them as a food source. Can you keep angelfish with cherry shrimp? Well, yes, I've done it. But once the angelfish get full size, they are surprisingly large and they will take an interest in the shrimp. If you're going to keep angelfish with cherry shrimp, you will need to have a real mass of hiding places. One surprisingly successful setup I had in the past was fancy goldfish with cherry shrimp. I had a 47-gallon tank that was absolutely packed out with plants. I had a massive shrimp in there. I needed somewhere to put the fancy goldfish and I had no choice. I put them in there. I could not believe it. They took pretty much no interest in the shrimp. And when they did, the shrimp were like little ninjas. As the fancy goldfish came bumbling down towards them, the shrimp would just, they'd be gone, quite happy. They were too quick. Choosing your fish wisely seriously increases the chances of this setup becoming a success. The good thing is many of us keep our cherry shrimp in nano tanks and nobody in their right mind is thinking of sticking an Oscar or some African cichlids in a 7-gallon tank. A question I get an awful lot is, can I keep a betta with my cherry shrimp? And I'm doing it just up here. But it does depend on the temperament of your individual betta. This fella up here takes no interest whatsoever. Brian, who you've seen many times in my videos, is an absolute ball of aggression. I haven't dared put any shrimp with him because he wants to fight the world. I only have to go near the tank and he's up and flaring, and I reckon he'd take me on if he had half a chance. So whether or not you can keep shrimp with your betta does depend on the temperament of your individual betta. It might be a suck it and see. Put some shrimp in, see how the betta is. Just make sure you've got a plan B, because if he starts going to pick off each of those shrimp, you do want to whip them out and put them somewhere else before you lose them all. So what else would we need to take into account in a setup where we hope to keep cherry shrimp and fish together successfully? Well, one thing you want to give serious consideration to is filtration. And I'm not talking about keeping the water clean or healthy at this point. I'm talking about the fact that powerful filters, like canister filters and hang-on-back filters, they have an intake pipe with a strainer over the end. And that strainer is fabulous for keeping fish out. It's absolutely useless at keeping shrimp out. The strainer, a fish will go past, barely touch it. If you've ever seen a baby shrimp, typically they come down the filter pipe near the strainer and they're gone. They're up the pipe into the impeller of the filter. Yes, sometimes they survive, but typically they don't. If you are setting up a tank for fish and shrimp and you're running a canister or a hang-on back filter, then you want to put an intake sponge over the intake of the filter. The sponge not only prevents food and leaves getting sucked into the filter, it also prevents the shrimp getting sucked in, and believe it or not, any particles of food that get stuck to that sponge become the perfect feeding ground for the shrimp. In any tank where you keep a hang-on back or a canister filter with an intake sponge and shrimp, that sponge will spend much of its time covered in shrimp, picking off the bits of food, picking off the bits of fish poop, eating the tiny bits of algae and leaf, plant leaf that get stuck to that sponge. You essentially provide a banquet hall for your shrimp. On a similar note, another thing you need to take into account is making sure your shrimp get enough food. Now, shrimp were, in the past, have often been sold as clean-up crew. Stores would say to people, chuck 10 of these in your tank, they'll eat all the leftover food, you'll be fine. And whilst they are a good clean-up crew, whilst they are in the wild detrivores, they will eat pretty much anything they come across. If you want your shrimp colony to grow and to thrive and to become a successful part of this community setup, you need to make sure the shrimp get enough food. You need to target feed them. The 5 male guppies I have in the 7-gallon up top here are eating machines. It almost doesn't matter how much food I put in there, they will consume it all if I'm not careful before any of it gets down to the shrimp. I have to put a floating food in to distract the guppies and a sinking food in to get down to the shrimp. And typically once it's down there and covered in shrimp, the guppies won't touch it. They don't take any interest at all. They're too busy worrying about the food up top. But if I only put a sprinkle of flake in, almost no food would get down to those shrimp. And although yes, they will eat starts of algae, they will eat leaves that are breaking down, they will eat the poop from the fish. If we want the colony to thrive, we have to get food down there. We have to build those shrimp up, particularly the females. Producing 30, 40 babies every month, year round, takes a toll on those female shrimp. We have to ensure we get sufficient food down to the shrimp so the colony can grow. The final thing we need to take into account is trying to keep the water stable. Typically, when we have fish, we are told over and over again we should be carrying out large, frequent, partial water changes. Now that's fabulous for fish because it does help lower the nitrate levels in the water. It can help if you have an ammonia or a nitrite problem. It can solve those problems for you. But shrimp love stability. They want their aquarium water to be stable pretty much all the time. They're incredibly hardy. They can cope with high and low temperatures. They can cope with a wide band of pHs. They can cope with surprisingly high levels of nitrates. But what they really want is for whatever temperature, whatever pH, just to remain stable. And if we carry out large partial water changes, we can cause the parameters of the tank to fluctuate. So try and set yourself up in such a way. Set yourself up with good filtration. Set yourself up with lots of live plants. Don't overfeed your tank. And if you do have to carry out a water change, smaller, less frequent water changes are better for the shrimp than large, regular ones. Now, early on in this video, I mentioned that my absolute favourite plant to keep with shrimp is Java moss. I think Java moss is something of a wonder plant. And if you want to know how you can go about growing a large, healthy clump of Java moss for your shrimp to live in, watch this video next. Thanks for watching.